Morning sunlight unfurled over the Helderberg foothills like a warm tablecloth, gilding the neat rows of Cabernet Sauvignon vines that marched toward the horizon. On most days, the stillness of Vrede and Vine's estate felt like a lullaby, distant guinea fowl, the faint sigh of wind combing leaves, and in the cellar a shy drip of wine inside silent barrels. For Thandiwe Jacobs, head sommelier, those sounds were the heartbeat of home. She moved between stainless steel tanks and French oak casks with the easy grace of someone who knew every knot in every plank. But on this particular Wednesday, as she siphoned a sample from barrel 18, a frown creased her brow. She swirled the deep garnet liquid, angled the glass toward a beam of light, then inhaled. Blackberry, cassis, a whisper of Fynbos, exactly what she expected from their 2021 Cabernet. Yet something foreign uncurled beneath the bouquet, faint but unmistakable. Cold charcoal, wetted slate, and a chalky grit that sat at the back of her palate like unshed tears. Thandiwe took another contemplative sip. The anomaly was subtle. A casual taster might label it earthy and move on. But she had grown up licking the iron-rich stones of her grandfather's Free State farm, training her tongue long before she knew such eccentric habits would one day earn her certifications and magazine features. The estate's soils were decomposed granite and clay. Slate belonged to vineyards further east. Chalk belonged nowhere near Stellenbosch. Her mind twitched the way it did when a jigsaw's last piece seemed forced. Footsteps echoed across the cool concrete. Koos Kruger, the 30-something cellar master, approached with a clipboard. "Barrel samples ready for the buyer from Dubai?" he asked. "Nearly," Thandiwe replied, masking her concern. "Have you tasted 18 and 20? Koos shrugged. "Same as the rest. Good structure, soft tannins." "Nothing unusual." His brow puckered. "No, why?" "Probably my imagination," she lied, placing the thief pipette in a bucket of sterilizing solution. She wouldn't tip her hand yet. Koos was competent, but he dismissed her palate more than she liked. Besides, whatever she'd detected could simply be a contaminated hose or a tank valve needing a scrub. Still, her instincts whispered. That afternoon, she tasted through adjacent barrels and found the odd mineral note only in 4 of the 65 Cabernets, numbers 17 through 20, clustered against the back wall of the aging chamber. Interesting. She crouched, scanning the stonework behind them. The cellar walls had been laid in the 1890s, unpolished sandstone blocks chinked with lime mortar. Near barrel 19, she saw a spidery hairline crack she hadn't noticed before. She pressed a finger to it. Flecks of grit came away soft and damp. Slate, chalk, damp lime. Her pulse quickened. Thandiwe fetched a small flashlight from her satchel and shone it into the crack. Black emptiness yawned inside, no thicker than a credit card. She imagined the wall in cross-section, sandstone, then the packed earth of the hillside. Had something disturbed that earth recently, seeping fine particles through to the wine? A playful mule interrupted her thoughts. Pinot, the estate's calico cat, twined around her ankles, demanding acknowledgement. Thandiwe scratched behind his ears, thinking. Wine takes on terroir through vines, not inside sealed oak. For an alien mineral profile to appear this late, something had to be entering the cellar environment. Dust from drilling, perhaps. But why would anyone drill into a cellar wall? She remembered a recent article about Cape Dutch manors burglarized for their antique silver. Thieves had bypassed alarms by tunneling from stormwater drains. Could such a scheme be underway here? Vrede and Vines stored a century's worth of rare vintages in the locked library room beyond the back wall. If someone wanted to pilfer the 1947 Pinotage worth a small fortune, covert entry through soil made sense. A chill licked her spine despite the cellar's constant 15-degree temperature. But a cosy estate rarely felt sinister in daylight, and she told herself not to spin thrillers from thin air. Still, she scraped a sample of the powder into a glass vial and slipped it into her pocket. At evening staff supper, Thandi sat beside Auntie Ruth, the gardener who had tended the herbs since the late 80s. The dining room's long pine table was strewn with bobotie, rice and chutney, the kind of homely fare that dissolved pretensions. Estate owner Peter van der Merwe carved lamb for his grandchildren at one end. Conversation flowed about pruning canopies, the new barrel shipment from Burgundy, and the ever-ballooning price of diesel. When Koos joked about needing a cellar ghost story to entertain visiting tourists, Thandi's fork froze mid-air. "Funny you mention ghosts," she said lightly. "Have you noticed any strange vibrations near the back wall? Or heard anything at night?" Koos chuckled. "You and your detective tongue." Peter looked up. "Everything all right?" "Of course," Thandi said, but she saw Auntie Ruth watching her with sharp, dark eyes. After dinner, the older woman lingered while others drifted away. "Child," she murmured, "something's itching your spirit." Thandi exhaled. "Maybe just overthinking, but I tasted slate and chalk in 4 Cabernet barrels, only those next to the northwest wall." Auntie Ruth tapped her lower lip. "During the drought of '03, we had a little landslide there, remember? Soil moved, left its fingerprint in a few barrels too." "I do remember, but the wines tasted of wet clay, not chalk. This is different." She told her about the crack. The gardener's gaze travelled to the window, where vineyard lamps dotted the twilight. "Full moon tonight," she mused. "Best light for digging if you don't want to run a generator." The casual remark sent a prickle along Thandi's arms. If someone is digging, they might come back after dark. She paused. "Would you?" "I'll brew coffee," Auntie Ruth said, nodding once. "You fetch your boots." At 10:30 p.m., with the estate hushed and the moon high, they reconvened in the courtyard. Pinot the cat, shameless night owl, joined the party. The 2 women slipped through the cellar door, careful not to click the latch too loudly. Wine barrels loomed like drowsy elephants. A flashlight beam cut across the dim, landing on barrel 19's staves, then on the crack behind it, now slightly wider, perhaps. Dust lay on the floor in a crescent. Thandi pressed her ear to the wall. For a moment she heard nothing but the conch-like roar of her own blood. Then a muffled clink, as of metal on stone. She jerked back, eyes wide. Somebody was definitely tunnelling. They retreated to the tasting room. Thandi's first impulse was to phone the police, but she hesitated. Koos had keys to every building. If he was innocent, involving the law prematurely could create scandal, jeopardizing export deals. Cozy mysteries, she reminded herself, weren't about SWAT teams. They relied on clever observation, subtle traps, and a cup of tea. By 2 a.m., as a kettle whistled in the staff kitchen, Thandi's plan had fermented. She called Ben Peterson, a family friend now stationed at the local precinct. He'd tasted enough of her wine to trust her palate. "I can drive out before dawn with 1 constable," he said. "Silent approach, but we'll need proof." "I can get you proof," Thandi promised. The next day, she arranged an unscheduled tour for a popular wine influencer, which served conveniently to bustle staff elsewhere. Using the distraction, She rolled the estate's most valuable bottle, a 1947 Pinotage, in a conspicuous crate labelled Archive Transfer, and positioned it against the suspect wall. She knew rumours travelled faster than wildfire. If anyone inside the Cellar crew was conspiring, the bait would be irresistible. That evening, as pink clouds bled into amethyst, Thandiwe lingered in the office, pretending to update stock sheets. Koos popped his head in. "Long day?" he asked. "Inventory deadlines," she replied, scanning his expression for hints of guilt. His face revealed nothing, but she noted a smear of mud on his boot heel, a streak not the estate's russet clay, but something paler. By midnight, Ben Peterson and Constable Lerato Dlamini hid in the hedgerow outside the Cellar's rear load bay. Thandiwe, mind racing, waited in the reception lounge with Pinot perched on her lap like a furry sentry. She wished she had a glass of MCC to calm her nerves, but clarity required sobriety. 1:12 a.m. A faint vibration trembled through the stone floor, as if a distant freight train were passing. Thandiwe set Pinot down and tiptoed into the dim corridor. She pressed a hand to the whitewashed wall. The tremor intensified. Clink, pause, scrape. Someone was working furiously on the other side. She texted Ben. "Movement." His reply, "Ready." 5 minutes later, a muffled thud shuddered, and a chunk of sandstone fell inward, skittering across the cellar floor. Through the jagged hole emerged a gloved hand gripping a crowbar, then the masked face of a man in a miner's headlamp. He scanned the chamber, eyes catching the wooden crate like a rat sniffing cheese. More wall crumbled. The burglar squeezed through, landing softly. Another figure followed, a shorter silhouette dragging a canvas duffel bag. They padded to the crate. The tall one lifted the lid, emitted a low whistle, and eased the bottle into bubble wrap. Thandiwe saw enough in the moonlight from the high vents to recognize muscular forearms dusted with chalk. The very arms that had wrestled with press hoses every harvest. A spike of hurt pierced her. Koos. She stepped back into shadow and dialed Ben. 2 intruders. 1 is Koos, she whispered. Moments later, the back door burst open with a metallic bang. "Police! Hands up!" Ben's voice bellowed. Koos spun, bottle clutched like an infant, and dashed for the tunnel. Thandiwe, acting on instinct, kicked a rubber chock under Barrel 19's wheel. The great cask rolled, blocking the hole. Koos collided with it and fell, the priceless Pinotage sliding from his fingers. Thandiwe lunged, catching the bottle an inch above the stone floor. Her fingers tingled with adrenaline and relief. Constable Lerato cuffed Koos while Ben pursued the shorter accomplice, who fled down the tunnel. Minutes later, he returned dragging cousin Jan Kruger, a known scrap metal thief. The story spilled quickly. Koos, buried in gambling debt, had learned of the antique wine trove and plotted to finance a fresh start. He and Jan scouted the hillside drainage culvert, rented silent battery drills, and tunneled for weeks, their spoil hidden under vineyard mulch. The chalky taste. Dust stirred by drills, sucked through microcracks into the barrel's bungs during daily temperature shifts. As dawn bruised the sky, Peter, summoned from his farmhouse, stood in the cellar's soft lamp glow, face ashen. "Koos, my boy," he said, grief outweighing anger. "You had a future here." Koos stared at his boots. "I'm sorry, I lost more than I could repay." Peter sighed, turned to Thandiwe. "How did you know, child?" She lifted her tasting glass in answer. "The wine told me." In the weeks that followed, masons repaired the wall, and the tainted Cabernet was micro-filtered, salvaging most of the vintage. Journalists clamoured for details of the sommelier sleuth, but Thandi dodged the limelight. Cosy mysteries, she believed, satisfied best around the hearth, not under spotlights. One crisp Saturday, she joined Auntie Ruth on a bench overlooking the Western Block. Workers snipped bunches of ripening Shiraz. The air smelled of sun-warmed berries and mountain sage. "You saved the estate a scandal," Ruth said, handing her a mug of rooibos. "Team effort," Thandi replied, accepting the drink. Pinot leaped into her lap and kneaded her jeans. "Besides, I simply listened to what was in the glass." Ruth chuckled. "Some listen, few interpret." Peter strolled over with 3 wine glasses and a dusty bottle. "We can finally open this without fear," he smiled, revealing the rescued 1947 Pinotage. He poured, and the liquid unfurled aromas of stewed plum, leather, and a dignified whisper of cedar. No slate, no chalk, only history. "To vineyards that speak," Peter toasted. "And to people who hear them," Auntie Ruth added. They sipped, the sun warm on their shoulders, the mystery behind them fading like mist off Table Mountain. In the hush that followed, Thandi tasted not only fruit and earth but gratitude, minerality of a different kind, binding soil to soul. Across the hills, the Cape wind carried promises of next season's harvest, and Pinot flicked his tail, content in the knowledge that some guardians walked on 2 legs and some on 4, but all kept watch in their own way.